Well, good morning. I'd like to welcome all of you to worship today and welcome those who are joining us online. Couple of things. One, this Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we will have our normal prayer meeting time in the fellowship hall, but we need to have a very brief business meeting to present the budget for next year for discussion. So this Wednesday, 6 o'clock in the fellowship hall, brief business meeting to precede prayer meeting. Hope that you can come and be a part of that. And that way, next Sunday, we will just have a called vote, no discussion. It'll just be given out and we'll vote on it. So discussion Wednesday night, vote next Sunday for that. And I do want to say especially thankful for those who have continued to give and support what has been the needs of our church during this time, and we're very grateful for that. As I am sure you have been made aware, we have decided to not proceed with the community Christmas cantata for this year, unfortunately, but we just didn't feel that we could do so in a way that was keeping things safe. So we are sorrowful about that, but we move forward. And here we are, Sunday morning. We are at the start of Advent, a season of longing, of expectation, but expectation that's almost kind of held in sort of a tension that's waiting for some kind of release, some kind of relief. I think we can all kind of feel that way to some degree or another, to feel that there needs to be some kind of release, some kind of relief. And so I invite you to worship. Consider that God has brought us to this place. He's gathered us together, whether we are here virtually or in person. And the opportunity is presented to each of us to pray, to seek God's face, to give thanks, to lay at His feet the burdens that we have carried in on our shoulders. So let us today, these of us here gathered in His name, acknowledge His presence, exalt His name, and worship Him together.
As we worship.
Song that Jesus gave me, it was sent from heaven above. There never was a sweeter melody, 'tis a melody of love. In my heart there rings a melody, there
morning. I love the Christmas season. I don't know about you, but it really is the most wonderful season of the year. My favorite part of the Christmas season, as far as the stuff, are the lights. I love the lights. I'm one of those people that if I can talk anybody in, I'll have to get you, Sherry. If I can talk anybody into going with me to look at lights, I love to go find one of those neighborhoods that does it upright. But the lights, that's one of my favorite parts. But the lights aren't Christmas, but the lights can definitely be a reminder to us of the one that is the one true light of the Christmas season and all seasons. There's this song, it says, the name of it, Shine on Us, and it says, Lord, let your light of your face, shine on us. In our Bible reading today, there was a man that was sent by God, and his name was John, and he came to tell us about the light of the world, the one that would come, and he shared that with us so that we would believe. But John wasn't the light. He just prepared us for that. In John 8:12, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. So, as we are moving into this Christmas season, and if you're like me and you love things like Christmas lights, how about instead of just focusing on, oh, those are so pretty, how about if we focus on when we see those lights, that they remind us of the light of the world, that they remind us of Jesus, that we remember that he's the one true light, and that we also remember that not only is he the one true light, but we are to share him with others. Pray with me, please. Father, I just thank you for this day. I thank you that you sent your son for us. And Father, I pray that you will help us keep our eyes on him as our light. In your name I pray. Amen.
Please stand.
How can I say thanks for the things you have done for me? Things so undeserved, yet you give to prove your love for me. The voices of a million angels could not express my gratitude. All that I am
Well, I want to read to you what I am sure for most all of us is a familiar story. It's found in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of governmental affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "King Darius, may you live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it into writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians. It cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the ring of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. And the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. This is the word of the Lord.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
There are 3 perspectives, 3 vantage points, if you will, that you could employ to look at this story. One vantage point could be the advisors of the king, the satraps as they're referred to. And from their vantage point, they see what seems very much to be a competition to come in first, to have the place of privilege. And so it's a place where self-promotion and jealousy, quarreling, it's one of those kind of rooms, if you're in it, you don't want to leave because you know that when you do, they're going to talk about you, right? Can you relate to that? I mean, think about, so that's one perspective. That's one kind of viewpoint from which you could look at this story. And so from that viewpoint, well, the king has what you want. And so you want to curry his favor. But that means that you're going to have to advance yourself in a certain way that causes you to shine. And that's where the real problem is, because nobody looks as good or is as wise or is as diligent as Daniel. And so try as you might to have good ideas and to be present and hardworking and to set yourself apart from your fellow sycophants. Daniel just does it better. Another perspective to look at this story from is that of the king. And I don't know about you, but when I read the story, at least of this stage in Darius's rule, do you kind of, does the word lazy come to anybody else's mind? Or inept, maybe? Ineffectual? I think one of those, or all three of those, or some combination of them maybe kind of describes him. He's obviously very powerful, right? I mean, he commands this vast empire. He's noted for his prowess on the battlefield and his stature and all of these things. But there's something about his rule that just seems to, well, I guess maybe he's almost like the Manchurian candidate or something. I mean, he's somebody else's puppet. He's out of his depth. Even though he has the power to do what needs to be done, he seems kind of easily played. Now, he likes Daniel. He's very fond of him. But when his smooth-talking advisors come and make the suggestion that people spend a month, in effect, worshiping him, well, he just bites right on that bait. The other perspective, I guess, that we could view this from is that of Daniel. Daniel has taken very seriously this role that he was thrust into as an exile. He didn't have a choice about where he called home. And yet, he excelled. He was hardworking. He was faithful. But he was also deeply devoted to his God. So much so that was evident to the other people, especially to those who wanted to outshine him and somehow jump ahead of him in the line. So here's Daniel, faithful, hardworking, seeking the good of. In fact, we like to quote Jeremiah 29:11, right? For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you a future. And I would argue that Daniel is that being embodied right here, because Jeremiah 29:11 is about living in Babylon. It's about making a life in Babylon, building homes, planting gardens, and living as if God is actually God in that place too. Daniel is an example of Jeremiah 29:11, I would say to you. He's faithful. And so I think we have these three perspectives here. The advisors, the king, and Daniel. And looking through their eyes, or at least attempting to, perhaps gives us some insight and some fresh ways of reading and understanding this story. One group wants Daniel to be harmed, and they long for it. The other, the king who was duped, is sleepless because he loves Daniel, and he can't believe what he allowed himself to be forced into by his own laws. And then there's Daniel. We don't read anything about anxiety or anything like that when the stone is sealed over the mouth of the lion's den. But that has to be... I just think about this in terms of sound, right? You know how like when you're watching a movie and the sound is a big part of the experience because the music will tell you something's coming, right? Nowadays, you can put the little closed captions on the bottom, and so it'll say things like eerie music playing. You're like, oh, hey, something's about to change here. Well, I don't know what the soundtrack was, but can you imagine the sound of that stone grinding into place? And how still and quiet it must have been on the other side of that rock in the darkness for Daniel to not be able to see. And then the first time he hears movement behind him. I don't know if you've ever been to the zoo when a lion growls. I swear you can feel it before you hear it, if you're close enough. It rumbles. What it must have been like to feel that sound in the darkness. Daniel, the faithful one shut in darkness, the king, one with the power to do what's right, but chooses through selfish means or whatever to do otherwise, sleepless in his room. And the jealous, conniving advisors waiting to open that stone up to see the results. 3 ways of looking at the story. But there are also 3 examples. 3 ways of examining responses. You see, I would imagine that many of these advisors were just like Daniel. They didn't choose to live where they live. They didn't choose to get placed in service to this foreign king. And yet here they are. And all that they can see is what he has to offer. And it makes sense, at least in my mind, that they would be doing everything they could to get the most from him that they could, because everything else that they would have had, where they might have had freedom, home, property, or choices about their future at one point in time, they don't have that anymore. They have to do what they're told. They have to live where they're told. They have to follow the rules and orders of this kingdom. And this king, who probably thought it was a grand thing to win and become ruler, only to find out that ruling is challenging. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? And he has power, but he succumbs to self-serving agendas, motives. He allows himself to be used. 3 examples. one example of those who through corruption who understandably, but nonetheless, are trying to work things out for their best end. They're willing to take advantage, they're willing to frame up, they're willing to do those kinds of things. And I wonder if sometimes that's not the example that we get tempted to follow. When we're in the room and someone begins to talk about someone else, and we enjoy it, maybe we join in. Maybe we add a little color. Is that not a move in that direction? Of taking selfish and twisted paths to try to better and achieve something more for ourselves? There are so many of those little subtle temptations that are just little shifts, little diversions that move in that direction, that fail to take into consideration the actual faithful response. And then how about the example of the king? How often times is it that it is within our power, within our influence, to be able to do what is right and good and necessary, and we don't. We go along. My friends, I think all of us are susceptible to those temptations. And if what immediately jumps to mind is how someone else is doing it, might I suggest that you just pretend you hold a mirror in your hand and just look at that for just a moment. Because if what you're thinking of is someone else, I would encourage you to think about yourself. Because all of us are susceptible to the temptation to be selfish, to advance in ways that are wrong, to take what is meant for more than just us and selfishly cling to it as if it's just ours. There's a little line in there, and I think it's the real kind of crux of this passage. It's after Daniel has learned of the decree, and he does what he's been doing. He knelt down to pray as he had done. See, I think that's the distinction. Because the faithfulness here that he exhibits is not just because he's some great guy, because he's so handsome and wise and strong and self-controlled. It's because he was continually placing himself where God could mold and shape him. And isn't that the very thing that gets challenged the most when we come into trying times? Is those spiritual practices that keep us dependent upon and in front of the God who has a plan and a purpose that he wants us to be a part of. Don't those things kind of slip and slide? Surely they do. How easy it is to get out of the habit. I would not be surprised if some of those people who were trying to leapfrog over Daniel at one point may have been faithful at their prayers. But for whatever reason, those things got set aside. Because what they could see in front of them, they valued as being more important. So I want to commend you today for gathering here in worship. We're told in the Scriptures to not forsake the assembling together of one another, as some are in the habit of doing. But let us do so more and more. And let us consider how we may encourage one another on towards love and good deeds. So I don't come here today to point fingers. I come here to encourage, to say, continue to make those practices central. Continue to take advantage of the opportunities that we have to gather, because the faithfulness that God would bring about in our lives is only the result of us allowing Him to continue to mold and to shape us. You have the freedom to respond as you feel led in this moment.
I need thee every hour, most gracious Lord. No tender voice like thine can be suffered. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace.
Sorry.
I have a song that Jesus gave me. It was sent from heaven above. There never was a sweeter melody. 'Tis a melody of love. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody